In Brooke Gladstone's The Influencing Machine, the author discusses different biases in journalism. One such bias is the fairness bias. Gladstone believes media outlets are often more concerned with appearing fair or equal than they are with providing accurate and truthful news. She argues that this desire to appear unbiased may sometimes lead to inaccurate reporting because both sides of an issue are given equal time to make their case, regardless of whether both arguments are valid. Arguably, the fairness bias has become far more prevalent with the explosion of opinion-based news shows. Three pertinent news stories that provide good examples of this are the coverage of global warming, the Benghazi attacks, and the Trayvon Martin case. These stories reveal differences between news outlets that often take vastly different approaches in their coverage of the same events. Each outlet chooses which voices to silence and which voices to promote, and these choices serve as illustrations of the inherent values and priorities of each outlet. On September 11, 2012, the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, was attacked by armed extremists, and 4 Americans were killed. Subsequently, there was great controversy over whether the U.S. government had been remiss in its duties to protect the personnel, whether through earlier precautions that were overlooked or by failing to send help during the hours-long attack. Different media outlets demonstrated Gladstone's fairness bias in different ways. Most outlets at least made the appearance of trying to maintain objectivity by inviting commentators with opposing views to debate on their shows. Some outlets were more balanced than others, while some shows perfectly reflected Chaim Perelman's New Rhetoric ideas. In New Rhetoric, Perelman was looking for a non-scientific, non-theistic foundation for discourse involving values. One way to do this is by inviting people with different viewpoints on an issue to debate one another. Another major tenet of Perelman's work is an understanding of the importance of audience. In History and Theory of Rhetoric, Perelman is quoted as saying, "Knowledge of those one wishes to win over is a condition preliminary to all effectual argumentation." The types of media that tend to enjoy the highest ratings today are the shows that cater to a specific audience, particularly a group with shared political ideals. The hosts of the show are highly aware of their respective audiences, and they often subtly steer the conversation in a way that reinforces their ideals. When it comes to Benghazi, the degree to which the fairness bias was evident varied between different media outlets, but it was clear that news stations were conscious of their audiences. For example, Fox News repeated emotionally charged phrases such as American hero and murderer multiple times, where other outlets such as CNN often used negative language toward Republicans. Perelman's ideas about the importance of audience for effective rhetoric parallel Gladstone's ideas about echo chambers, in which like-minded people are able to reaffirm each other's ideas and shut the rest of the world out. Therefore, the popularity of opinion journalism is a cause for concern because, as Gladstone says, the greatest danger of echo chambers is unjustified extremism. When people are able to isolate themselves from public discourse and become insulated within their own groups, it shuts down meaningful conversation.
But what is fair, and who decides what fair is? Gladstone argues that fairness is not simply giving equal coverage to all sides of a debate. She says that arguments around debates like climate change do not necessarily deserve equal coverage. President Obama seems to agree.
But the debate is settled. Climate change is a fact, and
it's probably safe to say that this guy would like to disagree. So what is really going on here? We have one side that says the debate is over, and another who probably feels like standing up and shouting, "No, it is not."
Or we can
It would seem that what Gladstone and the president are really talking about is what Richard Whatley called the burden of proof. Whatley claimed that if one side of an argument, like the scientists who have been arguing that humans are causing the recent change in the Earth's climate, make a claim, then the burden is on them to prove that claim. The burden is initially on those who make a claim, not those who deny the claim. So scientists, doing what scientists do, went into the field and did research. How many scientists? 9,136 in 2013 alone. and all but one found that humans were the main cause of climate change. This is why Gladstone and the President are saying that the debate is settled, because of the large number of hours scientists have put into answering the question and the nearly unanimous conclusion they have come to. Gladstone and the President and many other people and organizations like the UN are making the presumption that climate change is being caused by humans, and they have a lot of empirical evidence to back them up. This means that the burden of proof now lies with those who claim humans are not the main cause of climate change. And as Gladstone says, the media should not provide coverage of arguments without any actual evidence just to give the appearance of fairness. What is fair in this case, according to Gladstone, is actually not giving the climate deniers any airtime until they satisfy their burden of proof. After all, would we say that these guys deserve any airtime for claiming that approximately 6 million Jewish people were not murdered during the final solution? What the climate scientists' argument boils down to is this: they have enough evidence to show that humans are causing climate change. And the more time we spend debating whether or not this is true, the less time we have to slow down and stop the climate from changing into this.
Another example of the fairness bias in the media is the shooting of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman on February 26, 2012. Trayvon Martin, a 17-year-old African-American male, was shot by George Zimmerman, a then 28-year-old Hispanic male who was part of the Neighborhood Watch program. The case was covered by every possible angle, and most media outlets took one of two stances: the guilt or innocence of George Zimmerman in relation to the guilt or innocence of Trayvon Martin. So the question becomes, which portrayal by the media is more or less biased? Are either of them actually fair? Brooke Gladstone's idea of the fairness bias is described as equal coverage of two unequal sides, distorting the truth in pursuit of the appearance of balance. How then does this apply to the Trayvon Martin shooting? James Herrick's concept of the rhetoric of display fits well with Gladstone's fairness bias. According to Herrick, the rhetoric of display is a rhetorical analysis focused on visual or representational rather than language-based rhetoric. Since the majority of news media operate online, it is expected that a form of visual rhetoric would be more conducive to the medium than a strict language or text-based form. How does all of this apply to the Trayvon Martin shooting and subsequent trial of George Zimmerman? Just think about the amount of images that you see each day on the news. How many of those images are focused on text? Because visual cues are usually more powerful than words alone, the amount of images that we see has the ability to make a larger impact on how individuals view an issue. This graph depicts a study done by the Pew Research Center, a nonpartisan think tank based in Washington, D.C. The graph shows the focus of media coverage of the Trayvon Martin shooting. According to the study, the purpose of the coverage differed greatly depending on the media outlet: Twitter, blogs, and cable TV or talk radio. The portrayal of Martin and Zimmerman changed as the case progressed through the media. Both sides, right and left, changed the way they talked about the case. Martin was no longer portrayed as the 17-year-old, but was suddenly portrayed much younger. Likewise, Zimmerman's race was downplayed to further incite racial tensions. Gladstone's message is that we get the media we deserve. Being aware of the fairness bias can ensure that we do, in fact, get the media we deserve.